Well, it's October, so you all know what that means. As decreed by the unspoken laws of the internet, I am now obligated to play a horror game, in honor of the one true god that is online search algorithms. Not that it narrows things down or anything, after all, Steam casually shits out more horror titles than your weekly newspapers, and considering how most horror games have been repurposed to entertain the ever-increasing population of panhandling, overreacting online content producers, I decided to try my luck reviewing an older title, one that flew under my radar with the hopes of discovering some of the more subtle elements that have gone missing in horror games over recent years. Martha is Dead is a psychological horror game brought to this world by indie developer LKA. The game starts things off nice and familiar. You play as a young girl growing up in fascist Italy whose hobby in photography has gotten her involved in a traumatic experience down by the local haunted lake, resulting in the classic symptoms of horror game protagonist syndrome, including memory loss, irrational behavior, and of course being time skipped into the future far enough to conveniently avoid spoiling the story. Yet despite having pulled out every old trick from the book of horror cliches, an Italian girl with a haunted past, spooky lady in the lake, Nazis, the horror in this game never quite got under my skin, and here's why. You see, there are three different schools for horror games. First, there's the kind that would attach a dinner bell around your neck before unleashing every attack dog on the planet in the hopes that you'll someday run out of bullets. This would be your Resident Evil. Then there's the kind that will drop you off on Epstein's Island, leaving you alone to realize how completely screwed you are as you hopelessly beg for anyone or anything to come to your rescue, only to no avail because the entire planet is run by mindless sex offenders. That'll be your Soma. And lastly, there are horror games that would invite you over to watch and beat on a life-size doll that's been filled with jam and spaghetti before serving you a three-course dinner. That would be where Martha is Dead had picked up its degree. But see, the second one is the most effective because players are given the time needed to digest what is happening before the walls close in on them. And while Martha is Dead did make an effort to build an interesting setting, it never quite figured out how to set up a proper horror moment, and would more often than not rely on filler gameplay to keep the player busy in between meals. The core gameplay mostly consisted of fetching items from around the map mixed with some light detective work involving developing photographs, a sort of Nancy Drew meets the ghost of Mussolini kind of thing, and while the puzzles did its job of pushing the plot forward, it really was only there to pad out the game's runtime. I'll show you what I mean. In one instance, we were told that a very special trinket was buried in one of two possible graves, and the only way to figure out which one was by waiting patiently for a misty morning before taking a photograph of the site and developing it for future clues. Not sure why I couldn't have just dug up one grave then the other. Would have saved me a lot of time, which could have been better spent trying to figure out what was going on with the story, which I'm just going to spoil cause fuck it. After spending 7 hours muddling through the detective work, the game's climactic reveal is that your character has got more missing screws than a Boeing aeroplane, and all her actions can be dismissed as just her mind playing tricks on the audience. That's the mystery? I had already assumed she had lost all her marbles around 15 minutes in when she decided to impersonate her dead twin for no apparent reason. I mean, Christ almighty, talk about a clusterfuck. In fact, the game as a whole felt like it was put together using staplers and gaffer tape, with many critical story events only triggering if the player happens to be standing on a very specific spot with no obvious indicators whatsoever. This, when paired with the game's terrible optimization as well as the classic problem of being constantly caught and molested by roaming gangs of invisible walls, means that much of the game is spent navigating through the same featureless 100-acre wood looking for ways to move the story forward, while every now and then losing all your bearings due to the camera violently jerking in a random direction as the game engine struggles to load in additional assets. And when the sight of an upcoming thicket of narrowly spaced trees is causing me to flee with more dreaded terror than I'd feel from facing an entire squad of violent Nazis, something has clearly gone batshit wrong with your game design. All things said, I wasn't too happy with Martha is Dead. It certainly didn't help that despite having a very immature understanding on the topic, the writer still felt the need to push for a please go support mental health kind of message as part of his end credits. But the biggest deal breaker was just that the level designers kept throwing out the exact same type of puzzles or menial fetch quests over and over. You wake up, get dressed, find a watering can, go down to water the plants, only to discover that the watering can is empty, look for someone to fill it with water, and go back to water the plants. Like, what the hell were these developers thinking? I'd wager if this game was left in the hands of a more competent developer, who kept the scope focused on telling a story involving uncovering the secrets of a haunted house via capturing paranormal activities on film, then we'd be looking at a half-decent game. But no, sadly half-decent games are no longer legally sold anymore. Not in the land of mediocrity anyways. Happy Halloween.
Oh.